Hi everyone, just here to give you a few tips today on some hip mobility techniques to get your hips moving with a little bit more freedom to stretch out the tops of the thighs, your quads and your hip flexors. These movements can also be really good if you find that you have tight IT bands and rolling them out isn't really working. Oftentimes bringing more internal and external hip movements into your movement routine can help free up that tight IT band. And I say tight IT band because there's some misconceptions with tightness and that IT band. That'll be a later video, but for now, let's jump right into this. So I've got your legs in what we call a Z sit position. So make sure this back ankle is untucked. So top of the foot is on the floor. You can always put a towel or some kind of a prop under there if you've got tight ankles. Hand is going to be on the hip, and we're just doing something called femur rolls. So rolling that hip forward, I'm trying to lift my sit bone off of the floor here, and then I'm setting it back down, rolling it forward, rolling it back. Okay, but notice when I roll that hip back, I'm not collapsing and tucking my tail under. I'm keeping my tail lifted, and I'm just trying to let this bone, my thigh bone, sink into my pelvis. Okay, you can also use this leg to help do that. So I'm actually pressing this leg down into the floor to help me find a little bit more mobility in this hip joint here. Okay, so you would do both sides, but just starting with these femur rolls. And then hand can come down to the ground behind you, and we can layer on an arm press. So finding length now all the way through that side of the body, while simultaneously pressing down with your stance arm. Okay, so keeping the integrity of that bottom shoulder, which becomes really important as we bring that into our full hip press forward. Taking an inhale at the top, again, you're just trying to open up this whole side of the body and then setting the hips back down. And you're trying to set the hips back down just like we did when we did those femur rolls. Inhale forward and exhale down. If you want more of a stretch over the top of the thigh, you can always tuck your back toes here. Okay, just be mindful at the angle you're doing this to protect the knee. And that will give you a little bit more stretch to open up the front of the hip and down into the quad. Okay, so you can also do that there as well. And then lastly, to get both hips moving, you would then do the same series on the other side. But now I'm going to have you flex the foot. You're going to bring both hands behind you, and you're just going to find a few switches side to side. So pretend that your feet are glued down and you're just swinging the hips from side to side. This can also be a nice way to warm up the hips. We're bringing one hip into internal rotation, that's this hip, while the other hip is in external rotation, and then vice versa, okay? And you'll notice I'm lifting one hand up as I do this, just because it gives me a little bit more freedom, and I start to slide around the mat a little bit more. Try that out just several times on both sides, and hopefully that will help loosen up the hips and give you a little bit more space in there for your movement routine. All right, have a good